Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited for you to join us today. My name is Jen Elder. I'm the director of SAMHSA's Homeless and Housing Resource Center, and we are really excited about the panel discussion today about the peer support experience in our own words. So as that title means, we have a whole panel of peer experts here to share their experience. A quick housekeeping from me. Next slide. As we begin, quick disclaimer, HHRC is funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, but the views and opinions expressed today don't necessarily represent those of SAMHSA or HHS. Next slide. Right. We are joined by two American Sign Language interpreters today, Paige and Kip. We also have a live captioner, so if you'd like the closed captions, you can click that option on your screen. If you have any technical difficulties, please reach out to us via email or send us a note in the Q&A. Next slide. So we're joined by a good group today. So we have disabled the chat for today, but we do encourage you to submit your questions through the Q&A feature. We'll try to get to as many as we can, but I'll say I really appreciate during registration, we received hundreds of questions before the webinar. So that's what our panelists have used to prepare for today's discussion. We don't have that many slides, but they are available today on the website. I'll make sure to get the direct link to that in the chat. A recording will be available within a week. And at the end of the webinar, we'll have a link to an evaluation, which will redirect you to a certificate of participation for today. All right, next slide. And with that, with no further ado, I will go ahead and introduce Daisy Hernandez, who's going to be our moderator today to introduce our panelists. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Daisy Hernandez. I'm the Director of Peer Recovery TA for C4 Innovations, and I also identify as a woman as sustained recovery. I'm very happy, honored, actually, to introduce to you our panelists today. Emil Karen, Certified Recovery Specialist, brings a wealth of personal and professional experience to his work. Having navigated his own journey of reentry and justice involvement, Emil is a passionate advocate for those who are struggling with substance use and facing use disorder, and facing similar challenges. In addition to his work in the recovery community, Emil is a veteran who has served his country with distinction. His military service has given him a unique perspective on the challenges that veterans face when returning to civilian life. Emil is also a graduate of drug court and has a deep understanding of the challenges that come with interacting with the criminal justice system while in recovery. He uses this experience to mentor others who are under court supervision, providing guidance and support as they work to rebuild their lives. Through his work as a peer certified recovery specialist, Emil is dedicated to empowering individuals to achieve and maintain long-term recovery. So with that, I welcome Emil. We also have Laura. Laura is also a certified recovery support specialist by Alabama Department of Mental Health. Laura provides wraparound recovery support services to individuals with substance use disorder at the Council on Substance Use Abuse, or COSA. Her primary service population are people who are experiencing homelessness and justice involved individuals, pardoned or paroled from Alabama's Department of Corrections. Laura is very active in the recovery community in Montgomery, Alabama, and is very knowledgeable about community resources and services. And we also, help me also welcome Laura. And our third panelist is Des Martinez, Executive Director of We Are Not Invisible. And We're Not Invisible is a nonprofit organization in Fresno, California, operating since 2017 that advocates and assists individuals and families experiencing homelessness. Des assists in meeting basic needs, advocating for disenfranchised, marginalized, and vulnerable populations, and regularly assists in identifying and supporting housing opportunities for unhoused individuals when available in around Fresno City Madera County, California. Des has personal lived experience with experiencing homelessness herself and recovery, and has leveraged her robust advocacy efforts to form an alliance with other advocates in and around California. Together, the alliance works to address the challenges and complexities of unhoused individuals attempting to attain housing services, supports, and benefits. In 2022, Des joined a group of other local organizations supporting and assisting the unhoused and created the Fresno Tenants Union in 2022. And I think that, the experience, right, the wealth of experience that our panelists bring today is just an example of why, we should collaborate and do this work, right, and that we can't do it by ourselves. So welcome to all our panelists. Next slide, please. So here we want to just jump into, sharing a little bit about or the cover and the content page of a toolkit. And the toolkit is mainly the motivation for this conversation today. HHRC has released a toolkit that focuses on the tangible elements of employing peers in the Homeless Service Agency. And the toolkit builds on the success and the lessons learned from employing peers in recovery and behavioral health spaces, and lays out concrete considerations and steps to support other organizations that have the perspective or working on integrating peers in their own spaces of practice. Next slide, please. And without further ado, if I can welcome our panelists so that we can see their lovely smiling faces on our little Hollywood squares here.
Thank you, Daisy. It's good to be here. Welcome to the space, everyone. My name's Emil, as I was introduced. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, by the way. Where's the rest of my panel at?
I know your partner's here.
Yeah.
Des, there we go, Des. And then we have Laura. Floating somewhere on a boat.
Or might have stepped away.
No, I didn't step away. My camera was working, and then they switched it to the right side, and then it kind of I lost the screen.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties, part of this world, right?
Right.
It's a hit or miss, but I think we're getting somewhere, Laura.
Okay, there we go. There we go. I figured it out.
You figured it out. Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us in this conversation, because as a woman in recovery myself, it has a lot more intentional impact when we get to discuss, just like the title of our webinar this afternoon, right? When we get it from not literal horse's mouth, but from people who have the experience, right? It just makes more sense. So my first question is, what is the best strength in your experiences, right? Both as providers and people with lived experience, what is the biggest strength that a peer support specialist can bring people who are experiencing homelessness?
I'll go ahead and go first. Whenever I work, with people that are experiencing homelessness, which I work in a recovery community organization, so there's, a lot of overlap in the space between substance use disorder and people that are unsheltered. And, I think mainly the best strength I bring to the table when I'm working with a person who's experiencing homelessness is, like that identification, the ability to say, hey, I was once in your position and there's definitely a way out, even though it might not seem like there's a way out. I never thought I would be housed again. I didn't ever really plan on stopping using drugs or, getting myself up off the streets. But, being able to share that last mugshot is priceless. Like, hey, this is the last time I had an interaction with law enforcement. and here I am today. You know, I'm the director of this amazing organization, and you know, you can change too. So just being able to identify with them and say, I've been in your shoes, and you know, that connection is priceless. That's all I got on that. Thank you.
I definitely piggyback on that, because I think having the same type of experience with an individual, it better helps them create a different pathway out of whatever they seem to be cornered into at that time. Having active listening skills is definitely a big part of peer support. Um, Having a lot of interaction with them. Um, I think having the experience is probably the biggest thing, because to talk to somebody out of staying in the position of homelessness or staying unhoused because you feel free, I think supporting somebody that you suffer the same thing, you feel free when you're unhoused. So when you go out there and you give peer support to somebody else to go ahead and accept this help that's given to you, and to be by their side every step of the way, I feel is the biggest support that I can do as a peer supporter for other unhoused individuals. I follow them all the way through. I don't just support them out of accepting the help. I actually follow them into the shelter. And then from the shelter, I also help. I'm still there being a peer support into housing, because a lot of people are afraid to go into housing. So I never, with me and myself, I never drop the ball from point A to point Z. I'm there being supportive, and I'm never going to hand you off to somebody else. I think the strength of having the same peer supporter through your whole process is very important, because you share so much personal information with them of your experiences that it's not something you want to repeat to different people constantly all the time. So I think having a peer, one of the strengths, the biggest strength, is having the experience as the other person, interpersonal experience. Having an active listening skill is a big part, and then following them through their whole journey, I think, is really big, and that would be one of the biggest supports.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That you brought up two good points, if I may, of supporting them through the whole process, not just in becoming house, right? We often forget, right, that being housed brings a certain unhoused brings a certain set of challenges, but being housed also does, right? In the nerves that come with, or even some level of trauma around, oh my God, am I going to be able to pay my rent? Am I going to go back to being experiencing homelessness? You know, so being able to support them even while they're, and it reminds me, while housed, well, finally housed, right? But then it also reminds me of that tenet of, or principle of harm reduction, of not, you know, leaving them there, right? Meeting people where they're at and not leaving them there. So thanks for sharing that. You also shared having the same peer supporter, which, you know, kind of highlights the value of this toolkit, which supports, because we're having a lot of turnover. That's the reality across the field, whether in systems supporting people through homeless, you know, becoming housed, or with homeless services, or behavioral health, any level of behavioral health. There's big turnover. And I think that when we can get it right, and value our peers and support our peers through their employment, then we can keep them employed, and, you know, keep that connection with the individuals that they serve, and keep it successful.
Yeah, I think having even peer supporters, we need support.
Yeah,
you know?
I say that too.
Just like Bill brought up, there's a lot of secondary trauma, and we've been through trauma already.
Mm-hmm.
And to be as peer support is to have the same experiences is the best thing, but you also are going to put yourself in the line of secondary trauma.
Right.
And so peer support, having peer support is very, very important also. And I think that would be able to help keep a lot of people around, because you can only take so much trauma. And there's a time that your brain's going to just want to shut down. And that's not what we want from our peer supporters. We want them to have the same amount of help also in that.
Right.
And I just wanted to just add on part of an example for housing to have peer support is I have a lot of street family members. I'll take them from the street into housing, straight into an apartment. They have a problem with being out of their tent. So what I have come up with now is we don't put any furniture in the apartment yet until they're ready. We just put their tent in there, and their tent is set up in the living room. And it's taken about 6 months with several different people. About 6 month range is where they're finally coming out of their tent and sleeping on the floor in the living room. And then once we get them out of their tent, then we can start incorporating a sofa or a bed or a mattress on the floor. And it's to rehumanize them into living again inside walls. So to have that, to give somebody a housing voucher and say that you did your job, you did not complete your job, because we want to make sure that individual has the support to stay there and not go back to what it was, regardless if it was substance use or just being back out there because you're so used to, you spent 20 years out there on the streets. It's going to be hard to get them back. So I think that's very important for unhoused individuals that are going into permanent housing to have peer support attached to that.
Right on. Thanks for highlighting that. I remember working in an OBOT clinic and providing sleeping bags to individuals who were housed, and they stayed in the sleeping bag for a while in their house, in the new apartment. But Laura, what are your thoughts on what are the biggest strengths that a peer support specialist can provide to people who are experiencing homelessness?
Being able to work with individuals in Central Alabama that are homeless. A lot of times here is difficult to find shelter beds because they're so limited in this area. But what I have learned though over the course of my time working with individuals that are homeless is, if you build a relationship with them and they can begin to trust you just a little bit. I love what Emil said about getting to on their level and sharing a little bit about your life and your journey early in recovery, and to motivate them and to encourage them that, this is just a temporary situation, and allow me to provide you some recovery resources and to help you be able to come off of the streets and not be homeless, and either get you into, if they need medicated assisted treatment, if they're IV drug users, to be able to stabilize them there, and then get them into, for me, we have a lot of co-occurring people, and to get them plugged into our local mental health crisis center, and to get them stable enough to where they can actually maintain even a shelter bed of any kind. So, and to be there and be that hand that is always there, and to know and let them know that you will show up.
Right on, Laura. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's another, I shared it in one of our conversations in the past. That's another pandemic or a crisis, right? Homeless crisis. Someone said to me once, the opiate crisis, right? And that's a big term right now, right? Because of all the people that we're losing to opiate overdose. But for us to acknowledge that there's an opiate crisis, right? We have to acknowledge there's a housing crisis, right? And there's a opiate crisis because of the housing crisis, right? Because there's a economic crisis, because there's an education crisis, for then us to really understand the opiate crisis. So thank you, Laura. Now, my next question is for Laura and Des. What's a difficult misconception about peer support?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. A misconception. You kind of got me stuck here. Misconception. Email. Go ahead.
I got an answer for you. I think a common misconception I see here is that clinical people think that peers are trying to take their job. I had an email come in just yesterday from another organization that we work with, providing recovery support services to people that are in treatment. And the clinician emailed me and said, all of our people are trying to discharge because they say that you guys have everything they need to support them. And I wasn't aware that you were providing treatment options and so on and so on. And yes, I do see a lot of the participants we engage with are very excited to have someone who has lived experience to try and help them navigate their recovery. But another huge part of what we do as peers is make referrals to all these various resources in the community, whether it's treatment, detox, residential, whatever. And there's no way I would be sitting here today if I hadn't taken advantage of those clinicians and those resources when I was in early recovery to help me get my mental health back in check, to get my medication assisted treatment. I took a very holistic approach and I decided, okay, if it sounds like it might be helpful, I'm going to try and take that on. But yeah, we're not in the business of trying to compete with clinical team members or clinical organizations. Like, this is a very complementary role of the peer and the clinician, and we can help build the rapport and gain trust and when we're working together. So it's important that we take a collaborative approach, allow peers to have a seat at the table when these discussions are going on, staffing participants, don't leave us out of those conversations, and allow us to function in our capacity while you're doing yours. I think it can be very complementary, but there are definitely some challenges in there when the role isn't integrated properly, or peers aren't necessarily introduced into their position, or maybe the clinical staff doesn't understand the role of the peer, and they may have them taking out the trash or covering shifts at the front desk. You know what I mean? That is demoralizing. I've been in that position. The integration piece is so important when it comes to dispelling misconceptions about what peers do and what we're capable of. Back to you, Des.
Yeah, I ditto. I mean, that's the only thing I've really had anybody approach me about is, like, if you think you can do my job, here, take it, and that's not what we're there for, is to take somebody's job. Sometimes many of these shelters will hire individuals that don't have the knowledge of being unhoused, of having substance abuse, or having any type of learning disabilities or mental disabilities. And they're put in positions to be forced to understand us, and they don't. So they get frustrated with us. And peer supports, advocates, peer supporters, we come with experience of where they used to be. So we understand a lot more. And yes, we do. That's the biggest misconception, is that we want your job. We don't. Peer supporters, I believe many of us start as advocates, and advocacy work is usually not paid for. So we've been doing this for a while without being paid. So your job is not something that we're coming for. We want to give our experience of our knowledge and education and our life experience to help better this person. So we are here to actually help you guys help them. So accept us for who we are. We're not coming for your job.
That should be a phrase. Peer workers complementing clinical work, right? Because here in Massachusetts, we went through it, and there's still some spaces that have that challenge of understanding what the role is. And then we're not clinical at minimum, we're an extension of, right? We get to walk the walk with them while and I have a real unique role where, as a woman in recovery, I'm also a trained clinician, right? And started my career as a peer recovery coach. So having all these different lenses, I understand more deeply the value of a clinician, of a drug and alcohol counselor, of a psychologist, working hand in hand with a peer worker. Laura, what's your take on that?
Yes, I agree with the misconception, because a lot of people just really don't know what our job set is. And a lot of it is we need to provide more information. Even with I found this out in the local agencies in our area. They don't understand exactly what is a peer. Is it this, or is it a case manager? I let them know right up front, we're not counselors. We do provide recovery support services, and we try to we sit down in my agency, we actually sit down and we do what we call a recovery intake on these individuals to find out who they are, where they are, what are they needing. And at that point, to be able to figure that out. And we work really, really well with like court referral offices and some of the other local type agencies in the area. But the biggest thing is we actually work in a recovery community center, and we have another component to the Council of Substance Use that works with the prevention stuff in the central Alabama area. But in our recovery community center, literally everybody in there, we're not an RCO, but everybody in there is in some type of long-term recovery. But to be able to just let a lot of even people in the community, they don't really understand exactly, well, don't you just talk to people about not using or not doing drugs? And I'm like, well, no, we motivate and we get people in and we try to assist them in whatever kind of resources that they need, whether it be housing or detox or treatment or bus pass. I mean, it can be as simple as that. So sometimes we just really educate the people that are calling upon us to see what kind of services that we can help provide.
Right. Being that link, right, that bridge. And sometimes I find, in my experience, that there are times where a peer is the link to some of the clinical work, right? Or to the clinical services. I remember in my early recovery coach days, I would, describe what the role is to my new participant, and also have to describe what my role is to their counselor at the residential center where they were living. And I remember getting annoyed once and saying, you know how you give them referral to A, B, and C, but you don't really think about what barriers are to them linking to those referrals you just got them? Well, that's where I come in. I help remove those barriers so that link that you made, that referral that you made, could be more successful. So it's a real unique role that, we can collaborate with all system providers, not just clinical. But it seems like the clinical space some people don't have that understanding of what the role really is. So thank you all for sharing your experience with that. It seems like we all in accord of that misconception that peers might be taking their job. Now, my next question would be, how can leadership, right? Now we're tapping into management, right? The power players. How can leadership ensure a peer feels valued in their space or in their role?
I'll go ahead and talk on this one. One of the things when I was getting into this workforce a few years ago, I was happy to come in at an entry level salary, but I was making more money working in a restaurant, and it kind of became clear to me after, a little while of working in the field that the position we're in is extremely undervalued, or was. It has definitely come in the 2-3 years I've been doing this. It has come a long way. The salaries have almost doubled in our area for peers. So valuing us, like literally as, hey, pay us well is one way that leadership can ensure that we're valued, to pay us a living wage. People working in the mental health substance use space should not be making minimum wage. It's absolutely crazy for what we go through. I love this work, but you know what I mean? There's only so much I'm able to do at, making minimum wage. So the other thing I and this is something I've learned and have been trying to kind of push out to the greater peer workforce. A lot of us come here into the workforce without having any of these core skills like Excel or Outlook. And, I wasted most of my life using drugs. You know what I mean? I came into the workforce very eager to help people and to share my experience. But when it came to things like sending emails, or I accidentally sent a very personal email to the entire staff, and, how embarrassing, but I didn't know this. Like, I come here and they said, oh yeah, do you know how to use Word and Outlook? And I'm like, sure, who doesn't? But then really, I had no idea, you know what I mean? And looking at my boss is asking me to make a spreadsheet on some basic data for participants I'm working with, and I have no idea how to make a spreadsheet. But being in recovery and being resourceful, and taking the skills I learned out there on the streets of how to hustle, I mean, I started finding creative ways to learn these things. Like there's some apps you can use to help get training on Excel, and I'm trying to make up for lost time. But one of the ways leadership can help us feel valued is to support us in our professional development. Developing professionally as a peer can look different for each individual because our lived experience varies, widely from person to person. For me, it was, getting some of those technical skills that I didn't learn because I wasn't in the workforce. Uh, how can we educate or train our peers, so that they feel like they're improving in their professional development, just making sure that you're there to support your team every step of the way when they want to grow and they want to develop. How can you be there to provide that support for them? I think another really, really important thing that I haven't seen much of yet is providing clinical support for peer workers to help deal with secondary trauma. I've been thinking about how to try and propose a grant scenario where I'm able to provide that support for my team at no cost to them, because it needs to be addressed. I know just from my own experiences, sometimes it gets taxing, and I'm very resilient. So yeah, support them, make sure the mental health piece, the education piece is in check, and the pay. Those are my 3 top action items.
Okay, that makes sense. Laura or Des, any thoughts on that?
Yes, as far as leadership in the agency that I work for, when I came back into the field of it, working in substance abuse, and I got certified, and I got back into it pretty quick, and having to learn the technology, I am so with the meal. I mean, I didn't grow up in the technology world. And at first I really struggled. I'm so blessed. I had some program managers that had not too terribly long had gotten out of colleges and were able to sit there and teach me just a lot of the little basic things, and to encourage me and go. And I get frustrated and aggravated, and they're like, "Don't get frustrated." And they would continue to give me acclimate when I would accomplish something like a monthly report that had all the bullet points and all of the setup exactly the way that they wanted it. And to be able to someone help me learn how to do those types of things was very pertinent early on. And also in a leadership role, as far as being encouraged. And we have sometimes we have training sometimes in our offices, and recently we had an opportunity to go out of town and have an amazing training with the entire staff, and have professional speakers and trainers come in and to educate us more about the work that we are doing. And anytime there's some type of different local training or an opportunity to go and say, like, I took a faith-based support class, a 2-day session last November, and to being able to learn about other types of the peer work on the other side of substance abuse. And also, if for me, a wonderful in the management world, if I'm having a really bad day and there's a case that I'm working on and it goes south and it goes sideways, and it gets really next to me, and I get to a point to where I don't know if what I'm doing is out of the sensitivity of my compassion and my heart, or is this really professional, and I don't want to cross those boundaries. And when I feel like I'm getting in one of those situations, I'm going to go to management and I'm going to get the correct answer. So I'll be more professional to be able to handle the scenario and the situation better. Kudos to management. Thank you.
Right. It's not easy to be in their role either. That's for sure. Des?
Sorry, I had some difficulty time, so you guys were breaking in and out. Can you go over the question one more time?
Absolutely. The question is, right, how can leadership ensure that peers feel valued?
oh my gosh, they are so valued by listening, understanding, compassion, empathy, being able to be there for them. Um, I think just being there and being supportive is the biggest thing, you know, that we can walk away with being a peer supporter that's the only thing I can think of right now is just being one of the biggest supporters that they need and understanding to have the compassion, the empathy, like all those words tied together is what we need to give to the individuals that we're helped and supporting, if that helps at all.
Now I have an additional question to that. How do you think leadership, or some recommendations on how leadership can support peer workers' recovery?
By having resources for them. I think by having the resources with the correct amount of funding, we can have resources available without funding. So having the funding go to the resources to help with that.
Thanks, Des. What about Laura or Mel? I feel like I'm saying that wrong.
My name,
Yeah,
it's Emo.
email.
Yeah, like evil with an M. What was the question again, though, about funding?
How do you think leadership can support the recovery of the peer worker itself?
The recovery of the peer workers. So one of the things I do with my staff is allow them 2 hours of self-care built into their schedule every week, because just from my own experience, I know sometimes I won't take lunch, I won't, do these things, but I've made it mandatory for staff to do something outside of the office for themselves at least once a week for 2 hours, just to, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we are not in the position to take care of other people, so I got to try and at least make sure that they're as well as they can be. So they're effective in their position as a peer specialist. And I don't mind spending a little bit of money on that type of stuff. It's definitely pays dividends on the backside. Yeah.
I agree with Emil. Have the agency I work for, we usually only work a half a day or so on Fridays, and if we need, for me, I know where our office and stuff is located, and the weather here is usually it's not too hot. A lot of times we'll just like, okay, I just need to get out and walk around the building once or twice and just do some deep breathing exercises to try to regain my composure and sometimes just to clear my mind. And self-care is extremely important to me. Sometimes I just have to unplug, go to the park, leave all of the phones and everything in the car and just go for a walk or take a little small picnic or something and sit by the water and just regather my composure and my thoughts. But I'm very also active in the 12-step recovery community as well. And sometimes if I can just be around some of what I call my people and get a little bit of, I don't know, care and concern and be able to communicate with others that also work in this field. I have several friends that are also certified that work for different agencies, and to have conversations with them and how are you handling this, or don't you think we ought to just get away and just like go to the park or go for a hike or something this Saturday or whatever. So yeah, this is extremely important to take care of ourselves.
I agree with both of them. I think encouraging your peer supporter and valuing their experience that they have, I think it is something that's really big. And another support way is to encourage them that, where you're at as a peer supporter, there's another step up and another step. So you can encourage them that every step that they take and every experience that they bring to the table and learn, there's another step. They can always keep climbing, that there's always ways to move up within the company. And that shows that they appreciate their peer supporters in their company and encourage them to move on up the chain, value their experience is very valuable. That's why they have them as a peer supporter. So giving the self-care, like they said, Emil, he invests in peer support for the individuals that he has, that he watches over, which is amazing and great. Because if I would get the same treatment as a peer supporter amongst other individuals that I might have to sit in meetings at the table, being a peer supporter around my own people, as Laura would say, would be my unhoused community, because they're the only ones that do not judge me. I can walk in and look crazy one day and professional the next day, and they never judge me on how I look, and my hair can be messed up and they never question it. Whereas I walk in a room full of people that have read books and got degrees, and they're looking at me like, why is she in here in a t-shirt? Well, I'm comfortable in this t-shirt, ma'am, and to be able to speak how I speak and not be somebody who I'm not, I think is the most important encouragement that people can give to their peer supporters. Be yourself. Now, if I'm a little obnoxious, there's a way you can pull me aside and say, okay, Des, I want to teach you how to express the exact same thing. I'm not going to take from you what you want to say, but I want to show you a better way of saying it, just so you can show them that you are valued, you are experienced, you are credited. But I just want to teach you how to just say those words a little bit different, not take nothing from me, though. I think that would be great also, because it's hard to sit in meetings with people that say that because I don't have a degree, I'm below them, but yet they're calling me to the table to ask for my help. So I think just encouraging and making sure that you hold your peer supporter of value and let them know how valuable they are, I think the company would do so much better with understanding and giving them that self-care. I don't care if you got to bring a masseuse in once a month. These people can afford it.
I know Google in New York has these little nap booths in the hallways where you can go in a little booth, close the curtain, take a little nap during your work hour. But I agree with all three of you. I think it's extremely valuable to peers, right? To one, feel like a resource. As you were saying, Des, I don't have a degree, but my lived experience has given me master level experience of how to speak, right? My credentials on how to speak on what we're trying to solve here. And we talk about self-care. Some people cringe on self-care because many organizations, they have created a check the box item, right, on a yearly basis. Oh, yep, we train on self-care. They're good on self-care. But self-care is an umbrella term for so many things, right? We support self-care by being strategic on how we assign caseloads to peers, right? Being strategic, empathic, and trauma-informed in how we sit with them for supervision. We provide self-care like Emil does, where he allows the 2 hours of activity, a mindful activity during your work day, where you're not doing work stuff and you're not eating your lunch at your desk, right? Or you're not eating your lunch while you're driving from one client to another. It's important to be mindful of these little things that we can slide in there. I remember supervisor recovery coaches in community mental health, and once a month we had bi-weekly support the group supervision, but one of those supervisions was dedicated to primarily self-care. A peer was tasked with bringing a self-care activity for their peer colleagues, right? We did it at parks, we did it at Dunkin' Donuts, we did it at the gym doing the water aerobics with the older lady crew. Like, it's different things that we can put in place to support our peers and making sure they squeeze in some time for, checking in with self. And most importantly, I would say, even being in my experience as a supervisor, is supervision doesn't have to be so transactional. It's not about caseloads. How you doing, right? How can I support you? When we give the days off, right? I don't care if your vacation day was used for a doctor's appointment and your sick day was used for going on a vacation. Just take them. right? And I don't want you calling me. I don't want you to hear no responses on email on your day off. Those kind of things, right? So there's a lot of things to be innovative. Little shout out to leadership out there. Be innovative in how you show your peers that they're valuable to your organization. Great, thank you all for that. Now, my next question, we have a little, just be mindful and respectful of time, because that's what I do too. How can peers prepare for employment?
Let me see how they can research the company. Would be the best first thing to do. Definitely research the company that you're looking into becoming a peer support. Description, make sure that's what you want to do. Definitely prepare questions for your employee about the history of their company. Learn your basic principles about peer supporting. Let me see, learn the key elements of peer supporting. Those would be probably the first things that I would advise is, well, the first thing would be look into the company that you want to work for and research them thoroughly and see what kind of company it is. That would be, and have your questions always ready, because they might be interviewing you, but you got to interview them too. You got to know who you're working for. That's the only thing I can think of right now off the top of my head. Laura, email?
I actually have something for this. So one of the things that I did when I started working on becoming a peer specialist in the middle of the pandemic, and there wasn't a lot of resources available for, only way I even found out that there was a such thing as peer support is because one of my I use medication assisted treatment for my recovery, and once the pandemic happened, they were only seeing people via telehealth, and we were very isolated. But a peer had reached out to me from the organization where I get my treatment from and said, "Hey, I'm your peer specialist, and I just want to make sure you're doing all right." And I'm like, "What is a peer specialist? This sounds like something I want to do." So I was connected, but still struggling to figure out that pathway from the comfort of my room, as no one was going outside or anything. I happened to find a resource on the internet from I think it was ORN, the Opioid Response Network. I requested some technical assistance around how do I become a peer specialist. What's the best pathway for me to take? What kind of training do I need? And I was able to get a mentor that was at no cost to me, and it just skyrocketed me in my professional development, and I was getting the best, most current information from people that are actually working in the field. That to me was invaluable, and just figuring out what I wanted to do, what my role was, because there is a lot of different subcultures of peer support and different. We have the reentry peer, we have the peer for helping people experiencing homelessness, substance use, mental health. I mean, there's a million different niches that peer support could come, fall into, and figuring out what niche you probably are going to belong to might be important to help you, hone in those particular skills, because it's working with veterans can be different. Working with, people experiencing homelessness or LGBTQ population, what is the population you're going to be working with, and how could you, hone your skills to target that population, and how can you effectively share your experience to try and help those people. So yes, TA is a wonderful resource for incoming peer staff. Get yourself a mentor, learn about what you're trying to do, learn what the best practices are, and yeah, trainings are everywhere out there. Get trained, the opportunities just once I got involved and I started connecting with these various organizations, lots of training opportunities came along. There was one question in the chat. Someone was asking about, peers feeling isolated. I think someone said they worked at an organization and they were the only peer. We have coalitions here of peers, peer networks, where peers, like kind of stick together, almost like a union or something like that. You know what I mean? But we come together, we support each other, we help each other with certification or trainings, or, the credentialing process here is really wacky. So, if I wasn't resilient in my recovery when I started that credentialing process, I would have given up 100 times. But I had people there to support me and help me. As they've already navigated the process, so they were able to help me navigate that process. And anyone that comes in here at Recovery Connections that wants to become a peer specialist, we're going to grab them by the hand and walk them through that process, because we want effective people in these roles as peers. And when you see someone come in and that they'd be good at this, and they're at a turning point in their life, you can, hey, here's an opportunity that might be better than what you were doing in your past life. There was one other question in the chat I wanted to address as well, talking about role drift. It's extremely important that if you're going to work at an organization, that what your job description is, what you're expected. And, if you're asked to do things outside of the boundaries of that, or the parameters of that job description, it might be something you want to bring up to your supervisor. Because I always wondered when I worked at this one organization, why they made me cover shifts at the front desk, but none of the clinical staff had to do that. Why do I have to take out the trash? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not opposed to doing it, but why am I the only person that, and I just happen to be the only peer specialist at the organization. So advocate for yourself. You know what I mean? Know your position, know your role, and advocate for yourself, and if it's not the right fit, don't be afraid to switch jobs. When I started working in this field, I started working for a clinical organization, and the stigma and the way they treated me was so bad. I started looking for another job, and over the course of a few years, I was able to start at the bottom and move quickly up through the ranks of peer support. And now I'm the director of this organization. But, advocate for yourself. Do not, because if you open that door, then they will start to expect it from you. That's what I did. I was like, oh, I can take out the trash. I'll cover the front desk. I'm a good toe the line company man. And everyone else is like, yeah, let him cover the front desk. He's just a peer specialist. But that's demoralizing, so advocate for yourself.
Right on. That's important, right? I remember having a supervisor who always told me, you don't always have to bring a baseball bat to group supervision. And then something happened and she left the organization, and she said to me, you could bring the baseball bat now. So, be your own advocate, but don't bring a baseball bat. Now, on that same note, how can, or what resources do you recommend outside of, those self-advocacy skills? Any, maybe development, organizational, that you might add as a resource for them to support?
For me, the TA resources, they're widely available all across the spectrum of mental health and substance use and homelessness space. TA is technical assistance. For those of you that don't know, I think HHRC provides TA, so does C4, ORN. There's a lot of acronyms out there that provide technical assistance at no cost to you. And that, yeah, to me, they connected me with a national expert on recovery and peer support. He was from C4, Stephen Samurai. You guys might know him. He was my mentor. Love him to death. We still, over several years now, we talk almost every day. And he was so instrumental in helping me figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with this position. And I had no idea where it would take me when I got into it. I just wanted to help people, and it's amazing looking at the outcomes of what the work we're doing here in the community. Real lives are impacted by the work that we're doing, and that never, even though I'm in management, I don't want to lose sight of that, because that's why I got into this work.
Great, thank you, Emo. Now, my last question here. How do you think we can minimize, right, in terms of how can leadership minimize secondary trauma or burnout bias that develops in these roles?
That is a great question. I just happened to be reading a question in here that a tailor had written about how they hate the idea that peer specialists need to be fully healed. Um, I don't know who's ever been fully healed. I haven't met anybody yet who's been fully healed, because we do have, anybody that has trauma has triggers, and if there might be some triggers you haven't learned yet, so you can be triggered at any time. It can be years later you can be triggered. I've had people with use that have rehabilitated tell me that the sound of a torch lighter is triggering to them, so they're not fully healed. So in order, I mean, I'll be the first one to say I'm not fully healed. I'm still trying to learn how to help myself. After 8 years, I finally took a 4-day vacation to get away. I actually did what Laura said and threw my phone away for 4 days. It was terrifying. But secondary trauma, I'll be the first one to say that I suffered trauma. And going into doing the work that I did, it was healing me. Helping other people healed me. I had severe social anxiety. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew I didn't like being around people, and the only people I could be around was the unhoused community, because they didn't judge me. They didn't look at me different. But I never realized I still had trauma, because I felt helping people, I was healed. And that's not the case. So in order to protect yourself from secondhand trauma, I would say that being an advocate, a peer specialist, being a friend to somebody that's going through trauma, I mean, we all need somebody to talk to, because believe it or not, when you talk to somebody and they're telling you all the stuff that has happened in their lives that is very traumatic, you are reliving that with them. It might trigger something from your past, but also you're taking all that negative energy onto you yourself. And then you're carrying that because you've allowed them to take that trauma and now place it on your shoulders. Where are you going to put it? Because we can only carry so much, and you're going to get burnt out. You're not going to want to do what you're doing. You're not going to love the things that you used to love. Helping people becomes a job. And once it becomes a job, you need to take a break. So to protect yourself from secondhand trauma, have somebody who understands you, that understands the work that you're doing, that you can call when you're having a breakdown, or maybe a story you heard today that you had to hold your head up high and stay solid for that person, but it broke you later on. You need that person to contact. You need one person that's going to understand you. So I'd say keep with a therapist, keep with a friend, somebody really close that you can pick up the phone anytime to help with the secondary trauma. Because if you survive trauma the first time and you become a peer specialist or an advocate, there's going to be other trauma in your life. It's not yours, but it's somebody else's, and it will affect you if you do not take care of yourself. Sorry.
Right. Take care of yourself, staying connected. Now, I mean, I see we're running out of time. I just want to make sure that I can give Jen some time to share some logistics. And most importantly, thank the panelists for sharing their experience, strength, and hope to support providers out there, and implementing this toolkit and using it as their Bible and applying services and supporting peer workers. Go ahead, Laura. I mean, Jen, I'm sorry.
No, this is so great. I've been so engrossed in your conversation for the last hour that I just want to thank you so much. I wish we had another hour to keep going through, but thank you to Laura, to Des, to Emo, and to you, Daisy, for fantastic moderation of today's session. I hope everybody saw we got some really great shout outs in the Q&A. Just so much appreciation for all that you do in your work and for sharing your expertise with us. So I put a couple links in the chat, but we we do have a second part of this webinar series on August 29th. And we have some information there. It's in the slides, it's in the chat. And then the next screen, we've had a few questions about how to get a certificate of participation. That's just by filling out our evaluation survey. You'll be automatically redirected. So I think a few of you are watching as groups today. I love that idea. But everybody will need to fill that out individually to get your certificate. If you have any questions, follow up, want to connect with the presenters, please reach out to us at HHRC. We are happy to make those connections and to help support you in your work. So with that, thank you again to our experts for sharing their stories, their best practices today. We hope to keep collaborating with you in the future. And thank you so much to everybody who attended. All right, have a great day.